first client I tried this with right out of the gate, her answer was, I would regret that I died with no one really knowing who I was.
The Heart of Advice. It's personal. It's pragmatic. Here on the eMoney Heart of Advice podcast, we explore how to navigate both sides to help you take your financial planning practice to the next level. Join us as we speak with financial professionals to learn how they deepen relationships and improve client outcomes.
Welcome to the Heart of Advice podcast. I'm Sasha Grobinstetter.
And I'm Connor Sung.
And we're your eMoney experts. Here today with Abby Henderson, CEO, wealth advisor, and coach at Abaris Financial Group. She's a certified financial planner, a registered life planner, and designation of those specializing in the human side of money. So we're going to get into that topic in just a moment, but we first want to hear about your backstory, Abby. So can you give us a little bit about your journey and through the field of financial planning and starting your own firm?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys.
Of course.
So I started out thinking I wanted to be a CPA. And I know, everyone's like, oh, God, goodness. So I ended up doing a few audits and a tax season. And I discovered that the only thing that I really enjoyed was doing the personal tax returns. And so that made me, I was so lucky to be at a CPA firm that had a financial planning group. So that experience made me sort of walk down the hall and ask if I could change groups. So moving from audit to personal financial planning. And they were gracious enough to say yes.
It's awesome.
And yeah, oh my gosh, I was so lucky. And I did that for probably 4 or 5 years. And then in 2001, I started my own RIA. I've always had this sort of thing that, well, I'll just do it on my own. So off I went as a probably pretty naive 27-year-old. And luckily it worked out. I've been doing this for the whole time. And I continued sort of on the traditional path, I think, of being a financial advisor. And in 2015, I started working with my own coach. And we started really focusing on what parts of the job did I really love. I had been doing it at that point for, 15 years thereabouts, and was looking to figure out how I could do more of the pieces that I really liked. And so after that coaching session, I went off and did the registered life planner designation with the Kinder Institute. And so that introduced me to figuring out how to develop closer relationships, deeper relationships with clients, which is what it turns out I really love. And also started to dip my toe into the idea that there could be more than just, the goal of retirement and educating kids. And for anyone that's not necessarily familiar with the Kinder process, a big part of it is 3 questions. And one of the questions that you ask clients is, if you were to die tomorrow, what would you regret not having, doing, or being?
Yeah.
And a lot of times you get answers like, well, I would regret not having spent more time with my family. And first client I tried this with right out of the gate, her answer was, I would regret that I died with no one really knowing who I was and not being a good enough mother, sister, wife, grandmother. And I had this epiphany that if clients are going to share these things with me, I really needed to be able to serve them. And I had a responsibility to serve them as best I could. And so off I went to get more tools in the toolbox, because I really didn't feel like I was prepared for that vulnerable an answer. And that was something she had never shared with anyone ever before.
Wow.
Yeah. So off I went to become a life coach. I did that in 2018, and I did it with what is now called the Coactive Training Institute in California. It was one of the most challenging things that I have ever done. And ever since I finished that, I've been looking for new ways to integrate coaching, deeper relationships, better service to clients in my financial planning practice.
I can just say I admired that. Sorry, Connor, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to pay Abby the compliment of that's a lot of time and dedication towards looking for changing the way that people think about money and just ultimately just trying to help them fulfill their lives. It's both financial as well as more than just how the finances impact their overall life goals. And then obviously, being certified and designated to help people connect the dots between those two levels of success.
I was just going to say one thing that I discovered that was really interesting through this process is that sometimes it's strange, but as you're someone's financial advisor, you're more approachable. There's no stigma attached to talking to you, and they're talking to you and about their finances, which already feels a little vulnerable. And so I was really shocked and pleased that clients were opening up to me where maybe they wouldn't to other people.
Yeah. What do you think the breakdown was between, so obviously you were more experienced as you continued, you got the CFP, were registered life planner, life coach, but as along the way you were helping clients throughout that entire time. Do you think that where did it fall in value added from practical application, the actual education and learning? You mentioned that the life coach program was one of the most difficult things. I'm just going to assume, but I'll ask the question, was it because of the introspection that comes along with going through that course to help others? But if you could just share a little bit more of kind of the education of all three of those different pieces, and then how you implemented those learnings.
Sure. So were the three things the CFP, the RLP, and then the coaching? Okay, perfect. So, I think the CFP is fairly straightforward in that it gives you a really strong technical background to do the nuts and bolts of a financial plan. And so I think that the foundation of it all to being a wealth advisor. The RLP, I think, provided really great tools to help clients with their visioning, sort of what does the future look like, helps them be introspective and gives them a structure to think about these things. And I think where the coaching training comes in, for me, it came in because a lot of the things that I was maybe doing intuitively, I wasn't doing intentionally. I wasn't using, for example, I like to be a sort of a cheerleader for my clients, but I just sort of did that naturally, intuitively. That's actually a coaching skill. So to have that in the back of my mind, that's something that I want to intentionally use in client conversations, that awareness and expanding that toolkit is what I think the coaching designation gave me. And I would say what made that the most challenging is you have to think a little bit differently. So part of my coaching program, I had to do 100 hours of just plain coaching. So no financial planning, just coaching. And it was reviewed by a master coach as a supervisor.
Oh, wow.
And I submitted my first tape, and the supervisor was so nice. She said, "I understand why your clients love you. You have so much empathy and warmth, and you're such a good listener, and you did zero coaching."
Nice.
So,
That's brutal. That's brutal.
It was a little brutal. And they say that they take you down so they can build you back up. But she was right. As advisors, I think we are often, feel like we are the expert, and we do potentially more of the talking. And we also don't necessarily challenge clients. And as a coach, you're doing almost the opposite. You're helping the client discover the answers in them. You are challenging them. And so it was really interesting to try to learn how to take the different hats on and off and bring different things to the conversation in different places.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm assuming merge hats in different spots, but it sounds like trying figuring out the technical terms for some of the stuff that you were doing before, and then learning additional ways to round about some of the circumstances of stuff that you were doing successfully already. Which brings me to my next question. Essentially, you have a unique approach towards helping clients fulfill their life goals. And it is, I'd say, probably more holistic in nature than even holistic financial planning would encompass. But can you tell us a little bit more about your model of authentic wealth?
Sure. So it's been a journey. I've spent now 6-7 years trying to figure out how to incorporate all of these wonderful things that I've learned into something more cohesive. So, and for a long time, we have done financial planning investments in a pretty traditional way. You ask clients to describe what their goals are. They may tell you, I want to educate my kids and then retire at 65. Then we create some cash flow models that are designed to help them achieve those milestones. And I've evolved to the point where I want to think, as you said, a little bit bigger, even more holistically. And we have created what we call the model of authentic wealth. And the basis of that model is that we believe that you can reach authentic wealth when you align your resources, which we call the 5 levers, which are finances, obviously, because that's my background. But we also include health, relationships, time, and mindset. And so we believe that when you really dial those 5 things in and you align them with your values, your vision for the future, and the impact that you want to make on yourself, your family, and your community, that's where we can help clients find fulfillment.
It's like, to me, that those are all those things that we think about, like Connor said earlier, holistic planning, but you're really helping your clients all the way around, which I really do love. And you just said, so I apologize. But I really am so impressed with the amount of level of community that you build, which we'll talk about later, but also that, connection to your clients. I think that's really beautiful. So,
well, and all of those things are so interrelated, right?
Yes.
Having, more money may or may not be able to buy you more time, and more time spent on your health might improve that. So, we really believe it's all interrelated. So why don't we try to incorporate it all in one model and help clients on all of those levels? I mean, one thing to know probably, because I imagine advisors may be listening to this and think, oh, I don't know if my clients would like that. You have to meet people where they are. So I absolutely have clients that don't want this, and that's totally cool. That's not the direction I necessarily want my firm to go in the future, but I have plenty of clients who just want a traditional engagement, and that's fine. But we are using the model to sort of inform our bigger picture. So, whether that's our planning process, it's how we're, interacting with clients and prospects, messaging, programming. We're really trying to make this the cornerstone of what we do.
I also think it sets up a great framework to a point. Not every client will fit into every piece of this model or what you need to lean into for each individual client, because maybe it is in one of your examples of somebody that you were talking to in years past, it was more about their name being recognized in some level of persona, and then it was family. And others, family will come first and finances will come second, just as a vehicle to being a good parent, to being a good person inside of their family unit, whatever the definition is for each one of those clients. I think the creation of a a model gives you the flexibility to lean into each spot for each client, but you have something to clearly communicate as a process, as a thing, to say this is what we believe in, this is where we're going, this is how we plan on getting you there. And if there's pieces of this that don't resonate, then we won't necessarily have to lean in. But it
totally
is awesome.
Agree. Well, and I think, just as we all evolve as advisors, clients are going to evolve too. So, what makes sense for them, in year one of an engagement, probably, hopefully won't be the same as when they've been your client for 10 years down the road. And, maybe at that point they're ready. So, and I think that's part of having the consistency across everything you're doing is super helpful, because as we all know, the more and more you talk about something with a client, the more and more it starts to sort of resonate and sink in for them. And it creates a sort of a bigger ecosystem that makes sense.
Yeah. To pivot just a little slightly, I have my next question I'm going to ask you, but we found during our recent Evolution of Advice study that the most important step to personalize in the CFP financial planning process is step number 1, understanding a client's personal and financial circumstances. So we've kind of talked about it just a little bit, especially with Connor talking about processes. But can you tell us how you approach adding a personal touch into your initial discovery and onboarding meeting with clients? I really want to hear about that onboarding and the discovery meeting.
So I think the first thing to keep in mind, I always lead with getting to know my client's story first and foremost, before I even begin mentioning finances or my firm or the background or anything really related to the engagement or what we can do for them. I always want to find out what's important to them. Always want to find out what has made them reach out, because a lot of times you get a lot of knowledge from that question because something may have happened in their life that has brought them to making this call.
Definitely.
And I think this is where getting really good about asking powerful questions is important, and also being a good listener. But, as they're telling you their story and what's important to them, this is your opportunity to ask good questions. So, if they came to you because their child just got into Harvard and they want to figure out how to finance this, that's your perfect opportunity to say, oh, how did it feel when you got that letter? What's important to you about education for your kids? Like, there's all these things that you can ask, and they'll just open up all new areas of information for you. So step 1 is get super curious and lead with the client. Don't talk about yourself or what you can do for them. And then my next step, assuming we're continuing along the path to becoming a client, is to start to deepen the discussion about what is important and start clarifying their values. And there's so many ways to do that. One thing that I've done in the past is a value cards sort. And there's lots of these card sets out there you can buy.
Love those. Yep.
It's basically flashcards with different values. And you maybe start with 100 and you ask the client to just keep sorting them into piles until they come up with their 5 or 10 most important values. And that is so useful because, you've made them think about it and you've helped them clarify it. Because most people actually, if someone says, well, what are your values? Someone maybe comes up with 2 or 3, but they haven't necessarily tried to think about it more extensively or try to think about, well, if I only have to pick 5, what really are the most important 5?
Yeah.
And so another way that I like to do it is through those Kinder exercises that I mentioned. So the 3 questions, and just listening to a client describe, what they would regret. Or one of the other questions is sort of the lottery question. If money was no issue, what would you be doing right now? You can typically, if a client spent a little bit of time doing it, you can typically, from the answers to those questions, get pretty close to their top 10 values just by listening to their answers.
It's honestly, so I'll be completely, I did not get into Harvard. I did apply. So, but just the thinking about how powerful that message is of that feeling, like I could even feel my level of happiness had I been accepted to Harvard, unbeknownst to me. Maybe, somebody's essay got mixed up with mine or something like that. But like the feeling helps you align so well with whatever you're looking to do. And I love the values card exercises. I did it for myself, which was a little interesting proctoring my own as far as making myself cut down cards in half. But
it's hard, right?
It is hard.
It is. It's very hard.
Yeah.
But it makes most of my financial decisions, or most of my decisions in life, not even financial ones specifically, it makes it easier because if I go back through the values card exercise and try and get out of whatever value card I ended up with to make a different decision, I still end up with around the same end values or goals in my overall life, which makes your job easier then too. If you have somebody that's in a conundrum, you point them in the right direction based off of that.
Absolutely. It really affects everything we do. And yet oftentimes advisors spend years, multiple traditional client meetings, sort of gathering all the nuggets along the way of what those values really are, when you can just, sort of nail them down right at the beginning and then you're off and running with the planning.
I have a follow-up question from some of the things that you said. And I just want to know, how do you get your clients, really comfortable with you when you're having these kind of very vulnerable questions? I mean, asking somebody, if you died tomorrow, what would you regret? Or asking them, hey, if you won the lottery, what would you do? Those are kind of, to me, they're very vulnerable. And I just want to know how you get them more comfortable, I guess.
I think there's a couple answers to that question.
Okay.
I think one is to create an environment where there's no wrong answers and there's no judgment. I think part of what scares clients is that they think there's a right answer, or there's what they should say. Should is a bad word, I think, because it usually implies obligation, and it usually implies something that is not necessarily in alignment with the person and their values. It's more cultural or old money stories or something they learned as children. So, I think first and foremost, you want to create a no judgment zone. And I think you can, I come out and say that at the beginning of doing these exercises. I'm not here to judge you. I am here to help you realize your full potential, however you define that. What I think, first of all, doesn't matter. But I also, I'm thrilled with whatever your answer is, as long as it's authentic. So I think that's a big part of it. I think, we actually talked about this at eMoney Summit in terms of developing trust with clients. And I think that there's, being a good listener is important. I think right from the get-go, if you're asking good questions and you seem very engaged, you're already starting to create a level of trust with that person. And then, following through on everything that you say you're going to do, from, I said we were going to meet at this time and I show up at this time. All of those little things come together to create an environment where a client starts to feel comfortable. And then I guess the last thing that I would say is, you're right, these things can bring up some emotions.
Yeah.
And I think normalizing emotions for clients is really important too. So if they do start to get, teared up about an answer, just tell them, take all the time you need. This is so normal. So many clients feel this way. And that gives them permission to feel how they're feeling.
It's I love that. Yeah, it is tough. Yep.
Well, I'm going to pivot us a little bit. And while the direct face-to-face engagements, it sounds like you have great connections with your clients. I know that you've pursued other opportunities to help clients via, especially your podcast, Wealth Beyond Riches, talking a lot about clients' values and creating a vision for their future, and some of the things that we've talked about today with values and alignment. But could you just talk a little bit about the podcast and share some examples of exercises and techniques that you see to help clients explore and define their vision?
So the podcast is based on our model, and it's a combination of me with a co-host, and then I also bring on guests. And we are generally looking to bring resources and knowledge around the 5 levers. So that's the context of the podcast, and it's fairly new, so it's been a bit of a learning curve and an adventure. But just as a quick plug for podcasts in general, for people listening, I had no idea how useful it was going to be to connect with clients and prospects. I was doing it because it sounded sort of fun and it fit in the model, and everyone says you should do it from a marketing perspective. But the feedback I've gotten specifically from clients has been amazing. It just gives you as an advisor like more, I think, humanity than a blog or a 90-second video clip or something that's scripted. So just a quick plug for doing podcasts. I was shocked at how well it was received. And then in terms of exercises that we've talked about in the podcast so far, we've talked about the value card sort. We've talked about the questions. Mm-hmm. One thing that I like to do, and we've talked about on the podcast, is doing an assessment. So looking at the 5 levers, so your time, mindset, relationships, finances, and health, and seeing if you think what you're doing in those categories is currently aligned with your values. So for example, if you say one of your values is family, looking in that relationship category, do you think how you are developing and maintaining your relationships is in alignment with you saying that family is a high value? So that's kind of a cool exercise that I think is useful for clients and prospects to do as well. And you can do it with all of the 5 levers, not just your financial plan.
I definitely agree with you on that. Like I said, we love the values cards. I personally do. So we should hear that you use them that way, just to kind of not check clients, because it's not what it is, but just making sure that we're all in alignment. I think that's it's great. We talked about this prior to obviously recording today, but we talked about how a conversation might play out with a client. And we decided today, I guess we did, Connor and I did a heads or tails, and Connor lost. Sorry, Connor. But I'm going to be the client, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So it is a little scripted. That's okay. But we wanted to have the audience hear how it sounds. So, Hey, Abby, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. We've been thinking about doing a renovation to expand our dining room, but it's a lot of money and we're not really sure about it.
Sounds like an exciting project. Tell me more about that.
So we want to expand the dining room, but we feel like we can kind of afford it, but we know, this. We've always prided ourselves on being responsible with our money. We feel like it's not really a necessity.
Well, so first, let's just take a moment to acknowledge the fact that you guys have been such good stewards of your wealth over all these years that we've known each other.
Thank you.
I mean, that has served you well. That's why you're in the position that you can afford this renovation. So you should be so proud of yourselves. So I'm curious, if you do expand your dining room, what will you be able to do that you can't do now?
Well, now that our children have kids of their own, I have a vision of holidays with everyone around the table together, which we really can't do right now. I really want to be part of making new traditions with our grandkids.
So just imagine it's Thanksgiving dinner, the table's set, the turkey's on the table or whatever you guys are having, the candles are lit. How is that going to feel for you?
Just imagining that feels amazing. I also am starving for for turkey right now. So
Chills.
So tell me what would be possible for your family if this dining room came to fruition.
Well, I think we would feel closer to each other. Definitely give us an opportunity to connect for us, be part of our grandkids' lives. I definitely don't get to see them enough, and I really do miss them. It would create memories that we will always have, even after we're gone. So I remember holidays at my grandparents' house. It was honestly so special.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. So what if we were to reframe this renovation as an opportunity for you guys to honor your strong value around family relationships? How does that feel?
It feels less guilty. I feel less guilty about spending that money. That's for sure.
Awesome. So mull that over, start to feel if that's shifting things for you a little bit. In the meantime, let's just take a quick moment to figure out how you would fund this if you did decide to move forward. And I know in the past you've mentioned that you feel that being debt-free is really important to you. Am I remembering that correctly? Do I have that right?
Yeah, I remember my parents always taught me that you can never spend more than you have.
Yeah. Yep. I totally understand. So many of my clients learned a similar lesson and feel exactly the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So from a strictly math standpoint, it will cost you less ultimately to use your home equity line at this point rather than take the money from your IRA. I'm sure you remember that, IRA withdrawals are taxed in the same way a paycheck is. But I also don't want to ignore the psychological benefit to you of having less debt. What feels right to you when you think about how you might pay for this?
Can I afford it either way?
You can afford it either way. So why don't we do this? I modeled them both in Decision Center. So why don't we throw those up on the big screen and we can take a look at both of them. But before I show you anything, I want you to remember that there's no right or wrong, that the most important thing is for you to make a decision that feels right for you.
And NC. That was great. Connor, do you have any commentary from our role play?
I mean, I know I chimed in. I definitely the feelings. I seriously did get chills when I was thinking about my own family's Thanksgivings, and I think correlating it back, it really does. I think it helps people get more comfortable and make better decisions. So, and I think that goes leaps and bounds ahead of what I can imagine being a very much more tactical conversation where you just go right to the solutioning or right to the end point where you're saying, yeah, you can do it. And here's the best mathematical approach to doing so without any of the additional sentiment towards how the client would not actually feel towards one or any possible solutions.
And I think the key thing too is to always connect a client back to their why. So it's not about the renovation, it's about the family. And, this may come up down the road. It may come up in conversation. It may come up relevant to another decision. And so for you to have that background as an advisor that you can then leverage forward into the relationship is super powerful.
I think it's just such a great piece of not only like emotional intelligence, but, that empathy too, because you did ask me, I know that you have a problem with debt. Let's kind of talk through that for just a moment. And that, to me, it makes all the difference for clients. It's just remembering, oh, hey, I remembered this about you and those little key moments. So
definitely.
I have a question about, I know listening to your podcast, that you have created this wonderful community with your clients. And so I wondered if you could just like briefly talk about it, especially the meditation piece. I was like really interested in hearing about that. So, but the book club as well. Yeah.
So it's something I've really embraced basically since COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I used to take the approach that maybe my clients didn't want to know each other, and I was a little bit wary of smaller, more intimate events. And COVID changed everything, I think, for everyone. And that's where the meditation group was born. And that's actually where a lot of the stuff in the model was born, because during COVID, we did a bunch of webinars when everyone was just figuring out how to use Zoom. And we did a meditation webinar. We did a health webinar. We did a webinar on resilience with a Wharton professor.
That's awesome.
And then we did the meditation group, and it was really well received. It still continues today with my same core group, which if you asked me in whatever March of 2020, would I still be leading this meditation group in 2024? I'd say no. But it continues to be something people love and request. And that made me realize that clients actually really like getting to know each other. So we've done other things. So we have a meditation group. We have our 5-lever book club. So we get together once a month and I choose books rotating through the 5 levers, which has been really interesting. And it's a perfect example of how the model helped bring a cohesiveness to our programming, because we used to do the book club and I just picked books. So now it's actually got that structure to it of the 5 levers. We do smaller client events. We just did a wine tasting to celebrate the fact that Avarice is a B Corp. We did it virtually.
That's awesome.
So we did, it was really cool. We did wines produced by underrepresented communities and or organizations that were giving back to the community through scholarships. So that was really fun. And another thing that we've done for quite a while is something we call AFG Charitable, where I bring together a small group of clients and I give them a pot of money to give to charity every year, and they vote on who to give the money to, and we it's really fun, and they've all become friends, which is, again, if you asked me in 2020 if this is how everything was going to unfold, I would have said no. But it's such a lovely thing, and it's so much in alignment with what I want Avarice to be about, and it's a value add to the clients. Mm-hmm. So it's worked out beautifully.
It's like, I'm really jealous of this wine club or the wine tasting you guys got to do. Like, I'm definitely, I just think that those are so cool. Like, those are such great experiences. And then you get to know your clients better. You can put those nuggets about them away. Again, I mean, using kind of that emotional intelligence to really create those relationships.
It's been so fun.
Rewarding.
Yeah.
Is what it seems like. It seems like you truly enjoy participating in it, and I'm sure that your clients definitely do. I have been engaged in a few professional type engagements like that where there was a community generated, and I definitely went in with some aspect of hesitation to actually participate, number one, or even to attend. But I've met some amazing people and some of my closest friends now out of them, and the mutual problem, or whatever reason why they initially came to you looking for guidance or help, I think it's automatically a place to start in having discussions versus just meeting somebody randomly on the street or in some other format.
Definitely.
Well, just to close this out here, I have one final question for you. Number one, thank you for joining us on the Heart of Advice podcast.
Of course.
I'm curious, as you've been engaged, you've talked about your participation in eMoney summits in the past, and I know Heart of Advice isn't something new to you, but could you define the Heart of Advice for us?
So this is just my definition, but I think that the heart of advice is discovering how you can be of greatest service to your clients and then delivering on that.
I love that. It's sweet, to the point. And I think especially when we look at the Heart of Advice research that we did many years ago, I think that hits the nail on the head. So, yeah. Abby, I really want to just thank you, first of all, for being our very first guest, but for joining us on the Heart of Advice podcast, even with our, like Connor and I trying to figure out our dynamic too, but sharing your perspective on personalizing in financial planning, or personalization in financial planning. We couldn't have done this first episode without you.
Oh, well, as always, I love talking to you guys, and I love what eMoney is doing. It's obviously really aligned with how I think about the world of financial planning. So thank you for putting these resources out there.
Of course. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us.
The Heart of Advice podcast is produced by eMoney Advisor, a leading provider of technology solutions and services that help people talk about money. Learn more at emoneyadvisor.com, where you can find additional resources for advisor success, including the Heart of Advice blog, as well as ebooks, CE webinars, and events.